Welcome to the Los Angeles Real Estate Podcast on buying and selling real estate in Los Angeles. Today, we'll be talking more about TICs, Tenancy In Common, with my special guests, Liz and Cristina from the Rental Girls. We'll also give you 5 things to do to improve the security of your home, because we do live in LA. Cristina and Liz from the Rental Girls here in studio. Welcome, guys.
Hi, this is Liz.
First of all, before we even get started, I want to hear a little about how the Rental Girls began.
The Rental Girl. Well, the Rental Girl...
It was a double dare in 2002.
The Rental Girl,
She
but now
proved
it's
everyone-
girls, I guess.
Well, technically,
girls
there's
and
no...
a couple of gay
there are-
boys. All queens. As we say, hashtag queens.
The Rental Girl started, it was just me in 2004. And I got my real estate license, and I sold a triplex. And the lady who bought the building was having a hard time renting out one of the units, so she ended up hiring me to do it. I did it in 24 hours, and then she started telling people about me, and it just sort of snowballed from there. And slowly other agents started calling me, asking me if they could come join my company. And now we've got about 10 leasing agents and about 10 sales agents. And more recently, in the last 2 years, Cristina and I have started doing TIC, Tenants In Common.
Whoa. All right. Well, we're about to dig into the TICs. Real estate. Here we go. All right, ladies, TICs. Let's break it down. We've done a few we've mentioned TICs in previous podcasts, but for anyone just coming in, this is the first episode. They haven't discovered the LA Real Estate Podcast until now. Let's talk about it. TICs, Tenancy In Common. So, Liz, can you just break down a little bit about what a TIC is?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Tenancy In Common, it's just a way to hold title. And we've been holding title as Tenants In Common forever. It's basically when multiple people buy an apartment building together, they can hold title as tenants in common. And what that means is, let's take a 4-unit apartment building and 4 people buy it. Each owner has 25% interest in the property. Each owner can will their share or sell their share. And what we're doing today, or what we've started doing in the last couple of years in LA, is selling multiple units or properties, multi-unit income properties as tenants in common with exclusive use to one unit. So, and that's sort of the critical part here is the exclusive use. And that's what's different.
So basically a bunch of people are coming together to buy a property, but they only get to use, so they all own it together,
Right.
the entire property, but
Exactly.
they only get to use their specific unit and maybe some outdoor shared
Patio,
space.
a garage, or right.
So what happens is, on title, everyone has 25% interest in the whole property.
If you're looking at, right, a fourplex.
A fourplex. We use a fourplex when we as examples when we're talking about this. It's
Because
just
we're
for-
horrible at math otherwise.
Yeah.
We couldn't do this with 7
But
units.
you
Let me
can-
just
it can be
tell
2
you why we use a fourplex as an example. 25%.
You can buy tenants in common with 2 units, 3 units, 10
100,
units.
sure.
2 to 4 units is pretty simple. 5 units or more involves a little bit more process with the DRE. But just for simplicity's sake for this podcast, the Department of Real Estate.
Yeah, most people wouldn't know that.
That's
that
right.
initial. Yeah, the Department of Real
Don't
Estate.
Google it. It's horrible.
For the sake of this podcast, let's just talk about 4 units. So 4 people buy a 4-unit apartment building together, and on title, it's going to say they each have 25% interest in the whole building. But then you have this 60-page Tenants in Common Agreement, or TICA. And the TICA is written to sort of mimic condo ownership. Your TICA is your CC&Rs. It's your rules and regulations. It's what's going to tell you how this group is going to run. And the TICA basically makes tenants in common with exclusive use ownership just very much like a condo.
Right.
So, if you're going to buy a TIC unit and you're wondering, can I paint my walls pink? Can I redo my kitchen? Can I tear a wall down?
Can I add another story or whatever?
Put it through the filter of what can or can't you do in a condo, and it would be very similar. So even though, people kind of get hung up on this fact, well, I own 25% of the whole property, and that's different than a condo. But the reality is it's going to look and feel like a condo. You wouldn't even know it's a tenants in common unit until you go to get a loan. I mean, that's the big difference is the lending.
Right.
So the lending is the big difference. And we've actually done a deal, all of us together.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about that.
It was a long
apologizing.
transaction.
Yeah.
So the interesting
only took 3 years.
Right. The interesting thing about Tenancy in Common in Los Angeles, it's a very new concept in LA. They're starting to take off. And, you know, the first group of transactions, everybody's sort of trying to figure out how to do it in LA because there's not a set way of doing everything. So
That's right.
every property is different.
Right.
We had the one we all did together was a triplex. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some of the properties have 7 units, some have 3, so they're all different. And what I'm trying to say is, so they're complicated because every transaction is completely different from the last one.
Right.
Having said that, you guys have done now a lot of TICs. How many TICs do you think you've done?
4,052, maybe?
We've done 50.
Or 50. I think it's actually, can I revise that to 50?
50, which is a lot. And it's funny when I've done 2 TIC deals. And when I was working with some of my clients, they'd reached out to other agents and none had ever done a Tenancy in Common deal. So they were the agents were a little bit scared of taking this on.
Right.
Sure.
Without having done one before. So, you know,
As
it's a steep, right. It's a steep learning curve.
There's a fair amount of stumbling around in the dark. Obviously we have, you know, we can pull back to San Francisco and see what their experience is and sort of like, well,
we should mention San Francisco. So this is new to us in LA. Nobody knows about it here, but it's hugely popular in San Fran. It started about, you know, in the early 80s, an attorney, Andy Serkin, he was a young attorney new to San Francisco, and he was sitting around his office with his colleagues complaining about how none of them could find a house to buy. None of them could afford anything.
Right. And apologies to Andy, because we've probably doctored this story a few times and made it a little more dramatic. He wasn't complaining that much. Okay, but keep going. He's going to hear this and call us later.
Amazing.
They sat around. They said, hey, let's buy a building together and we can each live in one of the units. So they ended up doing that. And then they sat around and hashed out the first TIC agreement. Other attorneys heard about what they did and said, hey, can you do this for us? Can you write an agreement for us? And it just sort of spread. Back then, the 4 attorneys, and for about a decade after that, everybody was getting on group loans together. So 4 people would buy a building together and they'd all qualify for the loan together. They'd all be on the loan.
So there'd be one loan on the entire property, which is, you know, to us terrifying.
Right.
And
I'd rather go on a roller
scary.
coaster.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's important to point this out because there's so much stuff online about the risks of buying a TIC, and a lot of it has to do with this group loan.
Right.
If 4 people buy a property together and one person doesn't pay the mortgage, they're 25% of the mortgage, it affects everybody else.
Right.
And if that one person wants to sell, they have to get permission from the other 3.
Right, because they want to know who's going on a loan with them.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Even still with these issues, the market took off. And in the 90s...
Yeah, and I like to just pause and stop and say, well, that's very telling.
Right.
In San Francisco, that there was a huge market that took off where strangers got on each other's loans.
Right.
I mean, you know, and it's still, you know, so imagine now with fractional lending where you each get your own loan and nobody's subject to anybody else's loan, how that facilitated the market even more.
So the fractional loan came out in the mid 90s, and basically lenders took on to this and they said, hey, there's a market here for a fractional loan. So, you know, since then, about 12 lenders or so have come to the market. Some have left. There's 5 now in San Fran offering this fractional loan product.
And basically, the fractional loan just means each person. So if it's a 4-plex and there's 4 buyers, each person has their own loan.
Like a condo.
Or their own unit. So really, it becomes more like a townhouse or condo
Exactly.
type transaction.
With fractional loan, if your neighbor doesn't pay their mortgage, the lender is going to foreclose on their 25%.
So just on their unit.
It doesn't affect everybody else.
That's just on their fraction, we'd like to say.
This is huge.
Yeah.
And this is why the market's taking off here. This is why, one lender, Sterling Bank, Sterling's actually from Michigan, but they have a huge presence in San Fran. Their TIC loan, they're probably the largest TIC lender in San Fran.
Yeah.
And they came to LA a few years ago to push the TIC market here in LA. And that's about when we got connected with them.
Right. And my client used Sterling
Yep.
as well. So
They all do.
They all do.
yeah. And I just want to mention too, as far as Sterling, so right now there's not a ton of competition for TIC lenders that I know about.
Right.
However, so it makes there a couple things with the loan. The interest rate is a bit higher.
They just lowered their rates.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
There's no 30-year fixed, so their interest rate is actually very competitive with the 30-year fixed.
It's not competitive with other arms.
It's not competitive with other arms.
Oh, I
right?
see.
But
So you can
buyers
only
don't really know.
Right.
So,
So just to break it down, ARMs are adjustable rate mortgages. So basically what happens with an ARM is that we have a couple different options for mortgages. So with a 30-year fixed, you have the same payment every month for the 30 years. Yeah. With an ARM, there's adjustments to the rate, and there's different, some adjust in 5 years, some adjust in 7 years. So for a TIC, you can only, I believe, only at this point get an adjustable.
You can only get an ARM, yeah. And that's
loan.
the way it's always been. And I think we're very transparent with buyers when we say we don't think there'll ever be a 30-year fixed loan product. But all of these ARMs are amortized over 30 years.
And I guess really when you're buying into a smaller unit, say like a little bungalow with a bunch of other people, probably in 5 years you might have outgrown that.
Well, that's
Exactly.
why it's worked, right? One, and this is, in my opinion, Tenants in Common, co-ops, these sub-markets, they're a response to unaffordability. Tenants in Common itself was actually a buyer-conceived idea, right? This wasn't like a company didn't come in here and say, I've got a great idea. This is coming from the consumer side.
Exactly.
As a solution to unaffordability. And that's really why these buyers, when I thought these ARMs are never going to work, no one's ever going to take these. Right. But we've never had a product for a first-time homeowner that didn't necessarily need to check all the boxes for 15 years.
Well, I was going to say, the biggest incentive to buy a TIC is the price.
Exactly.
So you're going to...
That's why it works. I mean, that is
Tenants
really
in Common,
why it works. Yeah.
Yeah, TIC is about 10, 20% less than comparable condos. So it is providing an affordability, even though some people might say, well, $500,000 isn't affordable, but it's affordable for what where the market currently is at.
Right.
Relative
so if you're
to
buying,
that area. Right. When
so,
a condo's $700,000, $500 is a steal.
So
right.
I noticed in some of your listings, you have listings in really hot areas, for example, Echo Park, or parts of Hollywood, or various areas where it would cost a lot of money to get in. So this allows people to get in and avoid paying these crazy, insane rents.
And oftentimes they actually spend less on their mortgage than they would renting a block away, like at Sutherland.
It makes sense. Well, we're going to stop here for a quick buyer's tip. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about TICs with Liz and Cristina from the Rental Girls. Here's a buyer's tip. Always check the drainage at a property. What I mean by that is water can be extremely damaging. And if you are interested in a property, walk around the perimeter of the property and see if it rains, where do you think that water is going to go? Is it going to go into the crawl space? Is there a place that it can go around the house? Just have a look at the drainage and always ask your realtor. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about TICs. So we've talked about the pros. You're going to get in for a lower price. Let's talk a little bit about the TIC community, because to my client, I had a client who, she loved the idea. She was on her own. She's living by herself, and she loved the idea of being a part of a small community. So, she had people to hang out with and communal dinners and all that sort of thing.
We're constantly saying that because your client's not alone. I mean, the majority of TIC buyers, they're renters. They came from renting, and they're used to living in an apartment building where they come home from work and share a bottle of wine with their neighbors. They'd have weekend potlucks or picnics. So, yeah, this is definitely attractive option because the TIC communities that we've sold so far have tended to be smaller complexes where everyone knows each other, and it's definitely a community feel. They're sharing expenses, they're sharing responsibility.
It's a beautiful thing, honestly. It took us, it took me by surprise to see them. You kind of get like an impression of humanity in LA, where people just really don't care too much about their neighbors or people. And I think it's a stereotype, and it's a beautiful perspective when we see these buyers and they're genuinely excited to have that first meeting together. They're excited. Can you bring the table? I'll do the roast. I'm vegan. You cool with that? They in escrow, they get excited. It gives me goosebumps. I'm like, wow, we are good. We are still good people. There's something worth saving.
Well, and I think a lot of people in LA, I mean, we have a lot of actors, musicians. A lot of people come from smaller towns all around the country to move to LA to pursue whatever their dream is to do. And I think, coming from a small town, I'm from Northern Canada, a tiny little town. And really, sometimes it's hard in LA to find a little community.
Yeah, your tribe.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a tribe through my kids. I've have that tribe now. Before that, it was my tribe through music.
Right.
Which was a super fun tribe, right, CP?
He's giving a thumbs up. Actually, he's walking away. I don't know why.
Our producer is actually hanging out at the table with us today, CP. So,
CP.
What's up, everybody?
Yeah, here he is.
He's shaking his head.
So
pretty hard.
having a tribe is important, and when you're working a lot, maybe you don't go out that much and go to the bars, and maybe you don't drink, and it's just nice to come home where your neighbor, you can sit and have a cup of coffee.
There's always somebody keeping an eye on the property when you're not around.
I think that this is a trend that we're going to start seeing. It's not just
communal ownership; it's communal living.
Have you heard of co-living, which is a really hot thing right now, where they're taking apartment buildings and sort of fractionalizing apartments even and putting bunk beds and to us it sounds like dorm room living.
I feel like that's fun for like 2 years.
Yeah,
like backpacking
you and I
and
both,
staying at hostels.
But we were just reading there's a building in downtown where they do this, where you rent a room and you share a common space, and the median age was like late 30s.
Really?
I know. And it's these artists or it's these self-employed people. It's incredibly affordable. That
I also think, because people especially in LA, we have such beautiful weather. People don't spend that much time at home.
Right.
So to spend a ton of money, this is something also about TICs. I think we have so many actors and musicians where they'll get a gig out of town, or they'll get a tour, or they'll be on a TV show. They're not at home very much. So they might be gone for a few months. And a TIC really works out for them because they know there's other people that can kind of keep an eye on everything.
Right.
So let's talk a little. So we've talked about the benefits. What about the risks of TICs?
When your neighbor's not so cool.
Right. That's always a risk. And I guess that's the same with a condo or a townhouse.
So this is something I like to point out when we talk about risks, is we have to sort of establish a baseline, because when we're talking about risks with TICs, what are we comparing that risk to? The risk of home ownership in general. So is it renting versus owning a TIC, or, the risk of owning a TIC versus owning a condo, the risk of owning a TIC versus owning a single family.
Right.
When you're looking at TIC versus condo, you take a 4-unit TIC unit versus a 4-unit condo building, it's going to be very similar.
Right.
In a 4-unit condo building, you're going to have the same issues with what
like
if your neighbor is not cool, But so I think
you have those risks.
The larger risks are the loan. I think that's the biggest risk, is that there's only one lender.
Right.
And if they stop lending on TICs, then if somebody wants to sell in the future, they would have to sell to an all-cash buyer.
Or that.
Or Bitcoin.
Or Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. So that was when we analyzed the risks with TICs, that was the one that I had to get over in order to be comfortable moving forward to selling them. And what talking to Sterling Bank and analyzing Sterling Bank's intentions and what they've been doing to bring the market here and their commitment. I was satisfied moving forward that they're committed to LA.
Yeah. They're also financing a lot of the front end of this, for investors, which is you want to see. So they've got a lot of meat on the bone there. Well, they're not going to obviously back loans for acquiring properties if they don't have an sort of like a long so
and I
that
also
was helpful.
think if it takes off, and it seems to be taking off, I mean 50 units is a lot for coming from none,
right.
I think other investors will start getting interested, and potentially other lenders will come along and lend on them, and then the rates and the terms will be more competitive as well.
Well, rates just went down, and we're courting the second lender now, so
that's great.
A lot of people think, say a lot of buyers will say, oh well, Sterling has a monopoly, and they get sort of upset that there's that they're in control and they're the only lender.
Right.
But our
they're
attitude
hogging the
is
business.
we are grateful that they're here and we're grateful that they're offering this loan. And it is a really good loan option, when you sort of research.
Compare all the arms. It's not a bad product.
It's a good product. And even if there was other lenders here, their rates would be where they are right now. So,
right.
And
so we're grateful for them because obviously we wouldn't have the opportunity to put 50 first-time home buyers into any equity, building product
and
if we didn't have them.
So it's just 50 units just through you guys.
Through us, exactly. Yeah. There have been others outside of us as well.
So, wow. And how long have you been doing TICs in LA
25 minutes.
I think we started a year and a half ago, almost 2 years.
Almost
so
2 years.
50 units in less than 2 years.
Yeah, and 25 of those were this year. So it's picking up.
So it's picking up. And we have another 20 to 30 for the rest of the year and 100 plus next year.
Yeah.
Ready to go, yeah.
Over 100 next year.
Yeah. And that's just the pipeline today. So the number's growing weekly. And that's, again, just our inventory. We're going to be busy.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to tell you, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. Is this a good time?
Awkward.
Yeah, I just wanted it to be recorded.
Awkward, guys.
It's okay. We're going to have like a 2-minute argument. Can you just turn around, Sarah? Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So I had one more question. If you have a TIC, so let's use the fourplex example. There's 4 people. One person wants to sell.
Yep.
So how does that work? And do the other 3 remaining get to sort of choose who comes in?
Right. Well, I think that starts with a game of, what's that Twister game? I think whoever sort of wins that game during their HOA meeting gets the choice whether they can sell or not. Is that right? I feel I might not be 100% accurate. I don't know. I think it's something about Twister.
So if you're a TIC owner in a fourplex and you want to sell, let's say you buy it today, you want to sell in 5 years. You just stick a for sale sign up front and you sell it like you would a condo.
But you obviously hire either Sara Skelton or Liz.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
A realtor.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Don't just stick a for sale sign out there. Don't do it, guys.
Definitely
Don't do
want
it.
to hire a real
the
estate
signs
agent.
are very bulky
Definitely.
and very weird to stick out there.
No, but it's the same process. You don't get permission from everyone else. You might want to you notify everybody else, and I believe there's first right of refusal for the other owners to buy. But
it's not like a co-op where you have to give a blood sample to get somebody else in and approve. There's no approval process.
So for people listening, with a co-op, there's often an interview.
Yeah,
for someone to get in. I've done a co-op before. It's
horrible. It's like a parole
entertaining
meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, it's horrible.
A lot of people think TIC, that's like a co-op for whatever reason, because
it's co-ownership.
It's
similar,
alternative to condo.
Yeah.
Co-ops are an alternative, but they're very different. And the reality is TICs is much more similar to a condo than a co-op.
Like a condo. Yeah, you would tell everybody that you own the building with, listen, I'm going to sell in a couple of months if you want an opportunity to buy it. This is market price. But other than that, you hire a realtor and you put your fraction or unit on the market.
On the market for sale.
Right, exactly.
And the value, I think, is that people get confused about this too. Everyone wonders, well, what's the value of my unit if it's only 25% of the whole property? So the value is based on your exclusive use area. So an appraiser is going to appraise it like they would appraise a condo. They're going to measure the square footage. They're going to check out what kind of
upgrades that you've done to that unit,
views,
your porch,
exclusive. Yeah,
right. So it's basically, it really is comparable to a condo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's the best way to look at it. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in the studio. Liz and Cristina from the Rental Girls.
Thanks
we'll
for having
have their information in the podcast notes. Obviously, if you're thinking about placing an offer on a TIC property, you're welcome to reach out to any of us and ask questions. Thanks, guys, for coming in.
Thanks for having us, and thank you to the listeners for enduring.
All right, we've got a buyer's tip coming up, and I'm going to get Cristina and Liz to hang out for the last segment, which is we're going to talk about ways that you can make your property more secure. Here's a buyer's tip. When shopping for your house insurance, ask if there's a rate reduction for bundling it with your car insurance, and you might be surprised and get a really big discount. All right, we are talking about 5 things you can do to improve the security of your home, because we do live in Los Angeles, so I don't care how safe your neighborhood is.
It's not
still
safe.
LA. It's still LA. We still live in a big city. All right, number 1, cameras.
Oh, yeah. Oh, get the cameras where you can shout at somebody through them on your phone. We do that.
I think
it's awesome.
the camera doorbells are flipping amazing.
They're amazing. And you can talk right through it. You can be like, yo, get off my porch.
If you're on Nextdoor, which is...
don't read the forum there. It's terrifying.
It's going down a tunnel. Like it's a little bit of a... You got to be careful about Nextdoor.
Yeah, you can lose 8 hours very quickly on that app.
But it's pretty neat. Like the cameras now, we have the Ring. We've got all the other ones that you can add additional cameras to. I have some friends that have cameras just so that they can spot a bobcat that's in their area because they think it's so pretty.
Wow.
And they have like the night vision, and they actually have video of the bobcat walking through the yard.
P22.
Yeah. But that's the mountain lion in Griffith Park, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so cool. Okay, number one, cameras. And there's a ton of different ones. But I'm actually about to install one just because I think it's really cool to see. You can spy on people. Who's going up,
that's
up and
a little
down
creepy.
your street. Okay, number two, an alarm. So I don't have an alarm on the house. I think they're more annoying than anything else. However, if you live alone and you work late, it might be a good idea
Especially if you're like in a transient, street where there's a lot of foot traffic.
Right. It's another option to have, and you can have different types of alarms. This is a super, super, super big one. 3, know your neighbors. Get to know the people on your street.
What's a neighbor?
A neighbor is the people that you go and you ask, hey, can you just...
stop screaming for a minute?
Can I have some of your lemons?
Yeah, it's the benefit of owning a TIC because you know your neighbors.
You know your neighbors.
They keep out watch for you.
But know your neighbors, know vehicles on the street, so you keep an eye on each other. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but our neighbors are super sweet. We're really close with them. And, they've called before and said, hey, there's somebody in your backyard. And I'm like,
you're like,
oh
that's
my
Clark.
gosh.
He hasn't been in the backyard in 3 years. It can't be my husband.
I'm like, that's actually the gardener, but it's good. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Number 4, windows. So windows, people forget to lock their windows.
Oh, yeah. That's like probably the number one.
Break-in. Yeah. We live in Los Angeles. You have to lock your windows. I know it's been hot as you know what. But you got to keep them closed when you leave the house. Yeah. It's really easy for people to jump in a window. And crime in LA is opportunity crime. It's when you forget to lock your car. It's you forget to lock your doors, your windows. Just lock them up tight. Something that people don't think a lot, number 5, is lighting.
Yeah, a good porch light.
And something that I thought was kind of interesting is that I go to the neighborhood council meetings, and one of the police officers there said, lighting's really important, and what's important is to make sure that the lights you have don't create dark shadows, because that's how people can kind of...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
how tricky.
Motion lights are great, although the coyotes will probably set them on and off multiple times a day.
Yeah, there's certain Ring cameras that they're floodlights with the Ring camera on it, too.
Right.
So
those are super cool.
Yeah.
And then this isn't on the list, but we were just talking about dogs.
Yeah, get a good-looking Rottweiler. Who's probably just a giant lover and wants to lick the robber to death.
Or get one of those tiny little dogs that just barks really big and sounds scary.
Those tiny
but they're
dogs,
really not.
they're biters. Yeah, exactly.
They actually are kind of crazy. It's been fun. This is episode number 12. We made it to a dozen.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. So I wanted to thank my guests. I've got Cristina and Liz from the Rental Girls. Again, their information is going to be in the podcast notes. If you have any questions on TIC ownership, you can reach out to them. And I want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of the LA Real Estate Podcast. Make sure you add us on social media. We're going to do some giveaways for some really cool podcast travel mugs. So we're going to have that. We'll do some live giveaways online.
I'm signing up for that.
Yeah, you should. Yep. Probably not going to win. But.
Come on now. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, girl.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys for listening. And we'll catch you on the next one. That was like the lamest buyer's tip ever, but I was tired and I couldn't think of anything this morning.
And get a Rottweiler. That'll keep everybody away in this horrible city.
Oh, yeah, I should add that to the thing. Dogs.
I got a couple of security tips for you.